Hello, welcome back. This is a very exciting episode for me because, believe it or not, this little podcast adventure has gone international with my next guest. I received an email from Sandy Davies, my next guest, saying that she had discovered my podcast and after listening thought she might be a good fit for it. I continued to read the email and she explained that she lives in Australia. To say that I was a little surprised to read that somebody from Australia had found and listened to my podcast would be an understatement. So I read a little bit more about her story in the email and, of course, quickly responded that I would love to have her on as a guest and was just so excited to bring her on and interview her and to learn more. And here we are. Beyond our exchange of a few emails back and forth, we had never spoken until we met and recorded this interview. So what you are hearing is my first conversation with her. So you're discovering it as I did as well. So it's such an enjoyable conversation. She's such an inspiration and such an incredible storyteller in her own right. So I can't wait for you to listen. Just a little bit of background info about Sandy before we jump in. Author and businesswoman Sandy Davies was born and raised in the American Midwest in the state of Kansas. Sandy accidentally ended up in Australia where she stayed. Sandy's mantra is it's never too late and you are never too old. An allergic reaction to a treatment for intimate dryness during perimenopause launched Sandy out of semi-retirement to become the Queensland Australia-based formulator and founder of award-winning HappyPause Balm, P-A-U-S-E, HappyPause. You can also find more inspirational stories from Sandy in the book Courage and Confidence, What It Really Takes to Succeed in Business, in the soon-to-be-released collection of stories, Sacred Promise, compiled by Dr. Tarari Trent, Oprah Winfrey's self-described favorite guest of all time, and Sandy's anthology, The Power to Rise Above, about resilience and teenage bullying, will be available in late 2022. When she's not writing, packaging and processing HappyPause orders, and heightening menopause awareness, Sandy enjoys helping others and spending time with her husband and their rescue dog Karma, hunting nautilus shells along the fringing reefs of the Great Barrier Reef and the edge of the World Heritage-listed Daintree Rainforest. You can also find more information about Sandy on our website in the show notes. Here we go. Welcome to There's More to Our Story, Sandy Davies. Davies, right? I'm pronouncing it correctly?
Well, actually, it can go either way. So I go by Davies, but if you're actually back in Wales, Davies, even with the E, is Davis. So I go by either.
Oh, that's fascinating. Well, okay. If you go by Davies, I'll introduce you as Sandy Davies. I'm just going to give people a tiny little intro personally. Sandy emailed us saying that she heard the podcast. She lives in Australia. And Sandy, I cannot tell you the audible gasp I had when I read your email. Because it's such a new podcast. And I'm like, somebody from Australia found my podcast. So I was practically in tears when I saw it and I read your beautiful email to us. So I just wanted to thank you. It was really wonderful. And I was touched that you reached out. So thank you so much.
Oh, it was a pleasure. And I was just so excited. Anyone advocating for women and advocating for more visibility for us on screen as we are is an absolute champion. So I was just so drawn to your podcast and just love what you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, as you already know, because you've listened to a couple of them, I like to give the guest a little time, just sort of tell me about you. Tell me about your story, just so people get to know a little bit about you. Because for people who are listening, this is literally the first time Sandy and I have spoken to each other. We're on a video conference, we're seeing each other, and we've never actually had an actual conversation. So I'm really excited to hear this story myself. So please tell us about yourself, Sandy.
All right. And please just interject anywhere if you want more information, or if I've been in Australia too long and I'm using too much Aussie slang, just jump in. But yeah, so I'm Sandy Davies. I live on Eastern Guyalanji country, whose elders, emerging and present, I absolutely honor and acknowledge. It's just such an honor for me to live on such sacred country. It's up at the very top end of Australia. I am in the Daintree rainforest, the oldest continual rainforest in the world, and it's right on the edge of the Great Barrier Reef. And it is so far from anything I ever imagined as a little girl born in Kansas and raised on the Great Plains.
I
So
am in awe of your story already. Okay. I would have too many questions. So just continue because I will just be gasping throughout and living vicariously through this amazing story. So continue.
I was born on the Great Plains. I was born to a returned Navy veteran and a musician mother, and loved growing up in Kansas. And I loved so many aspects of small town life. But in the same breath, from when I was probably 6 years old, I yearned for more, and I knew I wanted more. And my mom raised me to be so independent and so loud and so outspoken, much to the absolute horror of her mother,
Oh,
but
yeah.
much to the joy of my father's mother. So I
That's
always
wonderful.
remember, I I always loved having that one. Well, I had a mean grandma and a good grandma, I suppose. But I always loved that good grandma, even when mean grandma would shush me and tell my mom off. There was my good grandma who had come from such unspeakable lived history that she would just unshush me. And anyone that tried to pressure my mom for raising me as such an independent, outspoken person, which wasn't really the done thing in Kansas back then, she would say, "Now, y'all just go on and leave that girl alone." And it was just always lovely having her blowing that wind of wanting loud and outspoken.
Oh, what a fabulous opportunity for anybody, that being said, but for a young girl, that wasn't always the case back in the day. So, yay for your mom and your dad, and for your grandma who said, let her be, go do your thing. So, how did you end up in Australia, if you're okay sharing that part of the story? Because you're in Australia, it's so on my bucket list.
Well, you have to come. You'll absolutely have a ball. So we want to see you over here. And I think now that we're sort of emerging from the pandemic, there's going to be so much funding from the Australian tourism body put into encouraging people to come back, that it's probably going to be a bit like it was in the 80s. It is going to be affordable again, maybe for people to tick that off the bucket list. But what brought me here was an accident.
Oh,
I yeah. I was the first person in my family to go to university, and I had all of these huge dreams as a teenager, I suppose. I dreamed of being able to go to Boston College or to Amherst or to Southern Methodist University in Dallas. And I managed to get accepted into my dream universities because I had been a bit of a brainiac at school. But I came from a family with no means, and I
mm,
realized very quickly that wasn't going to be available. And I did manage to get enough scholarships to afford to go to an open university, which was Kansas State University.
mhm.
Best blessing ever, because that approach at an open university is trying to breathe opportunity into kids for that springboard into life. And one of those springboards for me was an international Rotary Fellowship to do my master's degree in social policy. And I had my eyes on a professor at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. She was so responsive to me coming and doing research. And then, unfortunately, an American was shot on campus.
Oh,
Rotary said, "We are not letting you go into an area that's not currently safe."
sure.
And I was heartbroken because it was a horrific incident that had happened, but it was a one-off singular incident.
Mm,
But regardless, the foundation said no. So I had the choice of New Zealand or Australia. And I ended up in Australia and arrived at a time when children who had contracted AIDS through blood transfusions were not allowed to access public schooling. So
mm.
that became a large part of my thesis and my pursuit for social justice in that era. And along the way, I actually still back in Kansas, I had a bumper sticker on my car that said, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." And
I
which I
have,
still
I have,
believe.
I have coasters from the Guinness storehouse in Ireland that says that very thing. I have coasters with that. That was at one time, I think, a Guinness advertising thing.
Yeah, I love it. And see, we were meant to connect, weren't we?
Yeah, mine via the Guinness warehouse, storehouse, whatever they call it in Ireland. But yeah, as Gallagher, look at my, yeah, in the map of Ireland on my face, you can tell where my ancestors come from.
Yeah, so I was here doing my graduate degree, and yeah, like I said, I had that bumper sticker back in the States. And there was a Welshman here who had come here with two suitcases and two daughters to build a better life for his two girls. And he was never getting married again. He was never dating. We had both had all these nevers. I was never even contemplating a man in my life until I was at least 35. And then our eyes met, and it was one of those, eh, absolute
Yeah, the
soulmate
rest was
moments.
history. Life
Yeah.
happens when you're making other plans.
Exactly.
So you came together and did you stay in, have you been in Australia since, the two of you, or did you go to Wales?
Well, we went back to Wales to visit family,
Mm,
and actually before we were married, I did go back to the States just to prove my little boots because I had to make sure that I was making absolutely the right decision. So I went back onto the academia path back in the States, but I'd left my heart in Australia, and
mhm.
he was so committed to having stability for his girls. So we made a deal, and I came back to Australia with the promise being as soon as our girls were grown, we would go anywhere in the world for an academic path for me. And by that time, life had changed that much, and my desires had changed that much that instead of pursuing academia after our daughters were grown, we sold our adventure based business that we'd had on World Heritage listed Fraser Island. And we thought that we semi retired to the remote tropics in far north Queensland. But I had quite a terrible journey with perimenopause and got thrown back into the world of business because I formulated a balm to help women with intimate dryness if they needed a natural solution to either complement HRT or instead of HRT.
Mhm. Yeah, when you sent me your information, I read a little bit about that, and I commend you for at least diving into having a conversation about a topic that, God forbid, is 100% natural and women go through all around the world, and somehow we can't talk about it because, oh, God forbid. And it's normal, it's natural, it's what happens. And so good for you I mean, I'm sorry why you had to go into that journey. That sounds like it was probably quite challenging.
But when I then decided, hey, I have to do something about this, and it's something we're not talking about, I had no idea that the stigma was so deep and so vehement and so strong. And I've I've developed, I guess, quite a bit of a, I don't know, like a duck, water off a duck's back, because I've been called vulgar. I've had people from all genders criticize being outspoken and mentioning the V word. Um, so I just kind of joke now. I've decided to become like the vag queen, and there's no going back. And destigmatizing menopause has got to be part of my swan song, I suppose, for the next generation. So it's not brushed under the covers, and we're not questioning how we're feeling about all those symptoms when it's open in a normal conversation.
Well, and that very much aligns to sort of the thematic um, part of the podcast. I mean, yes, I'm putting it in terms of the themes of media and television and film because this sort of aligns to that. If we had more accurate representation of what it means to normally age as a woman in society. Like it's not, this is a thing that happens and it doesn't have to be a taboo conversation. It's a taboo because we don't talk about it. There's no examples to make it less taboo. So if we could share stories and just make it normal, because it is, then we could have actual conversations and not be like, oh, shh, don't say the word. And and that goes to the anti-aging part too. And you know what I mean? It's like, oh, that's an aging thing that women shouldn't talk about. It's like, why? It's normal. It's
It's
normal.
absolutely normal. And I love that our generation is breaking down so many of those aging stereotypes and aging myths. And well, we are and we aren't, I suppose, because like part of the reason I reached out to you was during the pandemic, we ended up with a TV series being filmed in our region because it was a very accessible region to be able to adhere to all of the like COVID standards and that sort of thing for the shoot.
Mm.
And I had the luxury of being on set for the 3 months as an extra. And oh my goodness, it was so exciting. But in some ways, it was also saddening because here I was with something that was doing something so groundbreaking and they were being so different with their portrayal of women that I loved being a part of it, but I just wished it wasn't groundbreaking as well.
Yeah, I hear what you say. I mean, when you shared a little bit about that, when you emailed me, I looked into what the attachment, which if I can include in the show notes for people who want to read more about this one because she's a wonderful writer, by the way. You wrote such a beautiful story telling this, so I want you to share a little bit more about it. But I found it so inspiring. What you at least look it shouldn't be groundbreaking, but the fact is it's happening, which is to me very encouraging. So if you would be kind enough, I would love you to share a little bit about that because this to me is one of the, as much as I get frustrated about what isn't happening, let's elevate things that are being done right. And you had a really good experience. So if we can bring attention to that and bravo to those who did it, I would love for you to tell people about it.
Oh, yeah, oh, I would love to tell about it because I'm just so excited that this production company with a production house in Brisbane, Queensland, is doing something that to me is almost like a beacon for small production houses all across the globe. And it's just sometimes those trends can start with the smaller companies, and as they grow, then that ripple just grows. And I was in this production in Port Douglas with the Steve Jaggy Company, and now I've become a little bit obsessed with following what's happening with the Steve Jaggy Company. And it is consistent all the way through what they do with women being represented at the writer level, the production level, the lighting level, the runner level, the AD level, all the way across. But the thing I loved the most when I was on the set of Dive Club, which was a TV series for Netflix, was there were so many over 50s as well as women across the set on every level. And then my feminist brain was just so excited because the director was 8 months pregnant. In
Wow.
our era, you couldn't have disclosed that you were looking at starting a family if a family was important to you. You certainly couldn't have had that position in an active shoot. And it was just magic. And everything had been timed to perfection, and it wrapped for 2 months, or not wrapped, it paused for 2 months during the Christmas break, and then came back for the final shoots. And everything was just magic for Haley McFarlane, the director, and I was loving watching her be able to soar in her career and her personal life at the same time, and everyone see it as normal and natural and not exceptional. So that was one of my biggest joys of just observing. And then just the acceptance of so many over 50s as extras, and all of us were treated the same as the younger extras, which was really nice to see. And then more importantly, the main heroine, she was in her 70s and she was close to my size. For those of you that can't see us, I am a very happy, body confident, body positive, plus size woman. I loved that Kate, who was in the role of the grandma in her 70s, was very close to being plus size, and no cosmetic surgery, all in her natural beauty, and just celebrated for her natural beauty in the role. And not a not any pressure or emphasis on trying to look younger or have more makeup to de-age, and just totally embraced in all of her reverent glory. And I want to see that on every screen.
Oh my gosh. I mean, this makes my heart so happy. And again, bravo to the production company, bravo to Netflix if they were the people behind it, because the more stories that we tell, the more just normal reality of what this means, it does help um it expands the lens of everybody's view. Right, it's not just expanding a literal lens, but it's expanding the lens, which can lead to more empathy and compassion and understanding for just humans, because we don't sometimes know um, how many internal biases we have simply because we haven't been exposed to broader examples, you know? Um, so I think sometimes that that for women who don't like, afraid to share our age or admit to our age because it wasn't done. um I can't help but keep asking the question, why do we do that? Why do we do that? And if we could just get more normal representation of women who are active, who, because most of the women in my life are, many of them in their 50s, 60s. I have friends and family, and there's some in the 70s. They're very active and leading fulfilled, wonderful lives. And I just want more stories shared because I think it's far more of a norm and nothing we need to be quiet about and try to avoid.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, we need to see ourselves of all backgrounds and all diversities as we are
Hmm.
on screen, and not seeing people our age who we know have been told to maybe shed a few kilos or a few pounds before the shoot, or who have had to have work done to still feel like they can be selected and included in casting processes. We need to see all of us on screen as we are.
Absolutely. And the more we do that, which is partly the reason I wanted to at least have the podcast, is the more examples that I can bring women, just the way we talk. I mean, to encourage creatives and writers to think about what is a normal character of this age group talk like? What the types of things that we do? It doesn't have to be a biopic, but it's to say, don't fall back on stereotypes or what you've seen in the past on the screen, thinking that's what's expected or what's supposed to happen. It's it's an unnecessary trope to fall back on those things. And what I loved about part that you talk about was the diversity in the ages and everybody just was fully respected, and the older people were collaborating with younger people, and it was just normal. It's just normal.
Yeah, and that's what I loved. That's what I loved being on set. And it was maybe about 5 months later, I happened to be on a flight from Brisbane back to far north Queensland, and there was a crew for another shoot that was happening in Airlie Beach that had deboarded with all of their equipment, and one of the guys had a dive club sticker on his equipment, and I went up and said, "Oh, I know you don't know me because I was just always in the extras tent, but hey, you guys did such a great job." And we started talking, and he was telling me that he has been on sets for 30 years. And he said, I will never stop working for the Steve Jaggy Company because every time something comes up and we go on one of their sets, it's just like a family. And he said it's the diversity and it's everyone having an equal voice and everyone knowing they're free to speak and bring their best to the project. And I thought, it really is something magical that's happening when you do have the people that are putting the money behind it listening to not only what the audiences want to see, but what the workers want to be able to give.
Oh, absolutely. That's an amazing example, and I love that you had the opportunity to be part of it and just observe it. Observe it in a way that you can share with others what you experienced, and I think what I loved about what you wrote, how you recognize this is new. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking, but it is happening, and it's encouraging, right? It's really encouraging to see that progress is being made and has been made.
Yeah, things are changing and it's wonderful. It's lovely to be a part of a different definition for the future.
Oh, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Um, and for anybody listening that's in the creative field, hello, maybe reach out to this production company and ask how they're doing it, because it sounds like they're doing something right there. And I'm thrilled that you said that they actually, from what I understand, built into the storyline that these older female characters were rich characters in the storyline. They weren't just small little side stories. They had significant roles, if I'm understanding. Because I don't know if we have the show here. I couldn't find it. I don't know if it's made it here yet.
Yeah, I think it's coming. I think it's actually maybe coming next month, possibly to
Oh, I'm
US
gonna watch
Netflix.
for it. I'm gonna watch for it.
Yeah.
But
So
is it true
it's
that the
targeted.
character, yeah, they're rich
Yeah,
characters?
they're absolutely such rich characters, and the demographic is for teenagers. And I love that all of the teen stars are female. So it's just lovely, these strong female leads, and they're the ones that are out diving and out doing all the adventure. And I just love that they're taking charge and defining their own narrative and adventure. But the people that they're deferring to for guidance and wisdom, as well as one male character, are two older female characters. And I just love that reverence of wisdom and knowledge feeding up the
Hmm.
chain. And that's just such a great visual for the watchers just to be able to embody that and not well having those older women portrayed as natural women as we are as well and
Hmm.
being revered. That subtext is so powerful.
Yeah. Well, and I like the fact that they collaborate, you know what I mean? Because I think sometimes it becomes one or the other, or pitting them against each other because they don't resent that or they don't like the young. And I haven't seen the show, so I can't speak. But then again, so I just like when the whole experience was collaborative of all ages, because I mean, as much as there's a lot of focus on the youth because they do bring new ideas, they challenge us to think differently, which is wonderful. But older people bring other things to the table, which can be valuable too. So that collaboration, if they're not in competition, can actually be quite powerful.
It can be so powerful, and I think well, the other thing I loved was this sense of, I guess, egal just egalitarianism when they weren't rolling, because instead of the lead actors being in their own separate tent, all of the actors were always together, and it was almost always that the two older women would almost sort of be the center of the action, and the younger actors were actually talking and engaging and asking questions from their past, and it was just a beautiful thing to, of course, extras weren't involved in that circle, but as an extra, being able to observe that,
You can
it's just
observe it, sure.
yeah, it's magic, because that doesn't happen. Not
Yeah,
nine
not as
times out of
not
10, that
it is
doesn't
not
happen
it
on
doesn't
set.
happen as much as we would love it to see, and in a creative environment, what a great opportunity. Um, I kinda wanna go back a little bit to, I don't know your product, so I can't speak to any part of it, but I find it interesting, um, as you speak about it more, are you finding your comfort in talking about it, giving others permission to not feel uncomfortable about the conversation, or is it still like, I mean, I think sometimes your first instinct to be is like, "Oh, don't talk about it." But sometimes when I meet people who are comfortable with language and they've passed all that, it sort of is this odd permission for me to kinda, "Hold on, why do I do that?" I ask myself questions, "Where does this come from?" I'm curious about your journey on what that's been like, where you're dealing with a real thing. You found yourself having to come to for a solution, find a solution. But as you talk about it, what has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, well, if you don't mind if I divert and backtrack a little bit even more, I
Mhm.
kind of feel like to address how I've found the confidence, I guess, to talk about menopause and vulvovaginal dryness and all of that goes around the menopause sphere. I kind of actually want to go back about 20 years to something completely different. Um, so, my family had the unfortunate experience of losing my adult brother to suicide.
Mm, so sorry.
Um, yeah, thank you. Um, so Gary took his life the night before his 40th birthday, and it just, it just shattered our family and shattered my parents. And my parents tried for probably 5 years after that to grieve the journey together. And they just reached a point which heartbreakingly would have been the year of their 50th anniversary, where they realized that they weren't going to, they were going to drown if they stayed together.
Oh,
And they divorced the year of their 50th anniversary. And we arranged for my dad to be able to go back to an apartment in the little town where he had been born and raised, where his sisters were still, two of his sisters were still alive. And my mom joined us in our life here in Australia. And it was such a gift to be able to have my mom here with us for the last years of her life. But one of the things we found in having my mom with us was whenever we would talk about how she had come to be with us and how it was a result of my brother dying by suicide, people would often be uncomfortable with the word suicide and with talking about suicide. And we actually had a lovely gentleman who had been a customer of ours for many years. And he came and pulled us aside one afternoon and said, "Look, I know neither of you were born in Australia. So my wife and I just thought we should maybe let you know that, sometimes people can have really, oh, I don't really know how to explain it to you kids, but they can have very divisive views about suicide, and they can maybe see it as a sin or a bad thing. So I'd hate for it to be bad for your business with if you keep mentioning suicide. And we thanked him and appreciated his input. But for that moment, that was a wake up call that we thought, no, we're going to keep on speaking about suicide and talking about it because it's another topic that needs to be destigmatized. And it was probably 6 months after that chat that we had a former staff member who we hadn't seen in 6 years arrive from Western Australia, from across the country. So the equivalent of coming from like maybe California to North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And he and his new partner walked in, and we were asking, why we had fallen out of contact. I think we'd sent a Christmas card and it had come back. Um, and he just said, oh, life has been a little bit tough. And then that was the closure of that conversation. And then a few minutes later, we mentioned losing my brother to suicide. And he started trembling
Mm-hmm.
and then collapsed into a chair. His new partner started crying and hugged me and said, I've been waiting for this to happen for years. And then he proceeded to tell us that the reason we'd lost touch with him was because his son had suicided. And it was the first time he spoke about it. And we reconnected after that. And that made it my mission then for many years after that to always talk about that topic, because there were so many people that still felt shame in talking about it and couldn't process their loss. So I'd kind of already hit that thing, I guess, of talking about uncomfortable conversations, because it can be so important for someone else to hear that lived experience.
Well,
So
yeah,
then,
because I can only imagine that if you aren't able to talk about it, you end up having to process so much of that pain and grief alone.
mm,
And it's already, I mean, grief under any circumstances is a challenging journey, but to feel like you can't express it, my heart breaks. My heart just breaks.
yeah, absolutely. Because yeah, you shouldn't ever have to hide what you're going through. We should be able to have those conversations and ease. Nothing ever takes the grief away, but to ease the
No,
journey. And the other thing I've discovered too with talking about it is it helps you to normalize the conversation, to say to people, are you going okay? Are you having a bit of a tough time? And having those prevention conversations as well, so that we
sure.
all know that we matter. Um,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many facets to that that are I can't even comprehend. So wow, I'm amazed, and I what's the word I'm looking for? The courage that you chose to that you found within yourself, but that you actually embraced. I admire that, and I con congratulate isn't the word, but, um, I have such respect for the courage that you had to find within yourself to just to embrace it and move forward within your truth and what you had to do.
yeah, thank you. Um, yeah, so to fast forward then back to now in your conversation about me and the conversations I have with menopause. Um, I guess because of the gravitas of that,
Mm,
it's kind of made, in some ways, it's made having the menopause conversation easy, but it's also kind of painful and hard and hurtful when you have people, I don't know, call you vulgar or assume that dryness is only sexual and then get on a bit of a sexual judgment high horse. And it just, so you still have to keep being resilient again and again and again. You think, really? We should reach a point where this is a natural conversation and we shouldn't have to fall back on our resilience. But the thing I've found is one of my very first customers um, sent me this beautiful letter and said, I don't want to be known publicly anywhere, but this has given me my life back. And I developed dryness after my treatment with breast cancer. And then as the menopausal symptoms grew, it just got so much more severe. And I just really feel like I've got the rest of my life to look forward to now. It's just given me an extra bit of hope. And that, I guess that's what I found with myself and why I launched it, is because it, so many of us have dryness, but we don't even know. And then when we moisturize that region, we feel so good. And when you feel good, I always go on, if you feel good down there, you feel good everywhere. And I don't mean it tritely, because if we feel good in that bit of our private core, a bit of our sacred energy, we just feel good everywhere. But she was then telling her daughter a few months later, and her daughter shamed her and pushed her and told her to be out with it. And she has since then. And she says, I can't believe how many people I've spoken to about menopause now that are getting benefit from other people talking about it. And I've had that happen again and again and again with more and more women that initially it is shame. We don't want to talk about menopause anyway, but then if it's something intimate as well, it's even more
Oh yeah. Well,
shame.
and and what's so interesting when I hit menopause, the the extent of my knowledge on the topic about what some of the effects that I might experience were hot flashes, which I was experiencing, right? I'd heard of hot
Mm.
flashes.
But
The
that's all we
other
usually
things
hear
that came
about.
along with it never were discussed. Now, I might have been a little bit maybe it's because I was a little it was sooner for me than some of my female friends. I got it a little younger. But even when I found out the others were having it, we just didn't we the only thing we knew about it was hot flashes. It was it. That's the extent of my knowledge. And I was having emotional swings. I was struggling with my like, memory was shifting and I
Mm.
didn't know there was just a variety of different things that were happening that I didn't attribute to possibly something physiological going on in my body. It just didn't occur to me. And I had a sort of an emotional reaction to something and it had been observed I was having emotional reactions to certain things at work, and it was a colleague. I said, and she goes, "Well, I've noticed that you've had this." And she goes, and I said, "I don't know. Well, maybe it's menopause." And I said it like as a joke, as flippantly. And she goes, "Well, have you
Mm.
been to the doctor? Because I went through that." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And I called my sisters, all my older sisters. My mother was quite a bit older than I was, but my mother was, I was the youngest of a very large family. So my mother was in her 80s and 80s by that point, 90s, and it wasn't something you talked too much about from her generation.
Mhm.
And I would ask questions, and I'm like, well, this would have been a nice bit of information to have had before I ended up here thinking I was literally going crazy. And and I did go to the doctor and ask questions and found out that I started researching and went, oh, some of these things are normal. I mean, they don't feel
Mhm.
normal, but they are things that are commonly experienced. And suddenly I cut myself so much more slack and stopped
Yes.
the internal voice that was just like, what is wrong with me? What is the matter with you? Get it together. Once I realized there was other physiological things happening, I suddenly had less shame. Less feeling
Absolutely.
of like, what I am broken. Something is wrong. I've lost my mind.
And that's the thing, like, we're not less than when we're going through it. And I guess that's part of what led me to formulate and create Happy Pause, was because so many of the other options left me feeling less than, and left me feeling like I wasn't my usual happy, joyous, radiant self. And for me, fixing dryness made everything else so much easier to deal with. But the thing is, just like you were talking about at work, so many women end up leaving their current workplace because of those symptoms. And part of that too is because it's not always a conscious denial, but one of the biggest things with menopause that, well, the only thing we really think about is, like you said, the hot flashes. And we're in denial. And sometimes it's not conscious denial. Sometimes the denial comes from the fact we think it's something that was an older generation, maybe like in their late 50s or early 60s. We don't think that we're going to be dealing with perimenopause in our 40s. So we're
Right.
either in denial or we're outraged.
Right. No, yeah, and I will say my perimenopause started for me in my 40s. Yeah, I didn't know too much about some of it until I was literally experiencing it. And again,
Mhm.
it's just not talked about. It's like, oh well, that's a female thing. That's a woman's issue. And I'm like, it's a human issue. It's a biological issue. We are part of the human species. And it's something that happens. It's nothing to be, if we could just stop making it a thing, it wouldn't be a thing. It would just be, oh, that's what's happening. Perfectly normal.
Exactly.
And a little
Yeah.
bit more compassion, a little bit more, you know, understanding, of each other, of
Yeah.
ourselves. Um,
I I tell you what, they are on fire in the UK. The UK is just all over this menopause conversation. And in the UK, there are so many workplaces developing menopause policies for workplace. And there's even some very progressive workplaces in the UK factoring in menopause leave. So, in addition to your normal sick days, you will have a couple of days of menopausal leave.
I had
And
no idea. This is incredible to hear this.
it's amazing, and I can't wait for the rest of us to begin to follow their lead because, well, even with me, like, I live somewhere very remote in Australia. Um, so remote means that it's usually you will spend almost an entire day to have a doctor's appointment. You will wait months to get the appointment, and then you have to travel, wait for the appointment, and it can take multiple appointments then to get test results and all the rest. With me, for months, I was talking to my GP about the problems I was having, and I had 0 education about perimenopause. I didn't know menopause was just one day, but what we were gonna deal with all the symptoms was this perimenopausal lead up. So I didn't have the education, and neither did my doctor, which I've discovered now most doctors will not even have more than an hour or 2 hours during med school about menopause. So they are often ill equipped until they're dealing with a number of people going through those symptoms. He kept telling me it's just perimenopause. So I would take all that information and process it and go, oh, it's just perimenopause. Holy dooly. What am I going to do when menopause hits? If I'm not coping with this now and I'm having mood swings and flash anger and hot flushes and brain fog and difficulty concentrating now, feel like I'm going crazy. What's it going to be like in menopause? And that's the thing. It doesn't get worse after. It is perimenopause where it happens. And there's so many women, unfortunately, in the US, in Canada, here in Australia, not so much in the UK now, a little bit in Europe, who end up with doctors that will prescribe them in their 40s antidepressants, um, not even addressing the fact that it could be perimenopause. So we end up with everything just sort of being missed or scuttled aside.
Well, and and again, it's because there's no conversation, there's no stories, there's nothing that just says normal, normal, normal thing. It's like we
Yes.
don't talk about it, put it aside, and you know, and and when you don't have any visibility into it with through conversation and normal conversation, it also doesn't give, it creates a situation where it, personally speaking, I didn't know what questions to ask. It
Yes,
didn't, things didn't
exactly.
occur to me because I had no sense of that yet. Till you're in it. And if it was just something that we could at least acknowledge is normal and had some awareness of, some of those questions might have come to us sooner with less anxiety or concerns as something was, this is, if you just realize it's sort of biological. But to your point, some of it is the also, oh my god, I'm getting older, which of course the other, "Oh my god, I'm getting older as a woman. What that's like the ultimate sin, don't age. God forbid." Except what's the alternative, right? You're not gonna,
Exactly.
the alternative is not aging. That's
Yeah, and
not
we
how that
don't want
works.
yeah, we don't wanna be in the ground, like, yeah, we
No,
want to be able
right?
to
It's
thrive through this era.
exactly, and many women are thriving. We just need to hear more from them,
More. You're
more of
so
them.
right.
And I
Yeah.
just and I commend you. That's the word I've been looking for the past 15 minutes. Commend you for um, just jumping in and saying, "Well, I'm going to have to find a solution for myself that works for me." And in doing so, um, you opened up an opportunity for other people. You just whether or not your product is that the product, the fact that you can say it with ease gives others permission to do that too.
Absolutely, and I think probably even more I was so excited when I hit a home run and found this perfect formulation for dryness. But, so much more than that in opening up the conversation was about the whole of, the perimenopausal experience, because we should
Yes.
never feel less than. And it's horrific when we do feel less than or don't feel our best self with something that if we can have that conversation, we realize it isn't us and it's not, yeah, it isn't us, it's physiological.
And to your point, it's just a transition. It's a biological transition that is natural, happens. It doesn't mean we lose our value because it has happened. There is a
Exactly.
subliminal messaging. I personally believe there's some subliminal messaging is like, oh, well, now that you're there and that's happened, your purpose is complete now. You're done and your value has diminished. And that is not the experience that I have had in my life as I've aged, nor from the amazing women in my life that their value has been diminished in any way.
No, the older and wiser we get, the more we should be revered and looked to and honored. And I think our generation is going to be a part of ensuring that that happens across a wider spectrum of society.
Right. Well, and in terms of the media, obviously men are more positively depicted and they're given those roles, but anything that suggests that aging for anybody is somehow diminishing their value is a gender neutral it's just a bad it's not the right
Mhm.
narrative, and we need to stop we need to stop anything that suggests that old trope narrative, because it's not healthy. And for young people, you are going to if you can be part of changing this now, it will make life better for you when you're eventually here. Trust us. Help us change it now. Make your life so you're not sitting here having these exact same conversations trying to
Patience.
prove your worth, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. In Australia, we have an activist by the name of Grace Tame that was the Australian of the Year last year. She was integral in changing legislation so that if you were abused, you could speak your abuser and speak your story, and completely change the legal rights to speak your story. And she's just amazing. But she caused so much controversy because in the handover to the new Australian of the Year, there's always a picture with the Prime Minister. And she stood beside the Prime Minister, who had been very patronizing towards a number of justice issues through the year that involved women. So she stood beside for the photo without a smile, and the media erupted. And it's just so interesting to hear this collective of women from our generation saying the power of her not smiling is symbolic of everything that we smiled through. And there's
Mm.
one activist here, Jane Caro, that says, she says, you find me any woman over 50 who has not had to smile through advances in the workplace, who has had to tolerate a pinch or a grope or an inappropriate contact. And we smiled and we smiled and we smiled until we nearly broke our teeth. And then along came Grace Tame from this generation, and her ability to have the courage to not smile has the chorus of all of us who smiled. And I'd never heard it put so well. And I'm just like, absolutely, yes. I love this generation, and I love their power to say, we're not going to smile anymore. We are demanding change now. And I love it.
I love it. Well, and what what you talked about is she changed legislation to give power of story. It is
Mm,
the stories that are told that open our ability to understand things differently. And if
yes.
the only if stories are controlled by one point of view, or um one or two demographics that have a specific lens from which they see the world, if that's the only lens the stories are told from, um, it does a disservice to
Yeah.
those who walk a different path. And the more we can hear story, actual real story, it opens us all up to understand that what is considered quote normal, and quote air quotes for those who can't see me, um, is a much broader term than we might have thought.
Mm, absolutely. And, I often think that if we could all take a little bit of example from life in Hawaii and apply it to all of our daily lives. I'm a big proponent of living with aloha. But one of the things I find that is a part of living with aloha that you find on the Hawaiian Islands is that space for talking story. And
Mm.
there is space on the islands for talking story across all demographics, all ages, all gender, all race, and everyone just comes together in this Pohana way that together through all of our stories we are stronger, and that to me is part of that concept of living with aloha. And yeah, we all need to just have a little bit more of that spirit of aloha, I reckon, wherever we are on the globe.
Oh, what a beautiful sentiment. I did not know about that, about the Hawaiian Islands. What a beautiful concept that I agree we need more of it.
Uh, and I love it that concept of talk story is such an integral part of life on the islands and Hawaiian culture, and by Hawaiian culture I mean all Hawaiian nationalities within the islands. And you'll find whenever anyone is talking story, it doesn't matter whether it's a tutu, a grandma, grandpa, uncle, or even one of the kids, that space is sacred and honored, and that story is real and has value from that perspective always, and it's just sacrosanct. I love it.
Oh, I love it too. Um, Sandy, I'm getting a little emotional. I am so grateful, sincerely grateful that you found my podcast and that you reached out, because you yourself are a beautiful storyteller. For one, I want to. I hope it's okay for me to find a way to share the little article. I don't know if there's a link to the article, but I want to make it available because you are a beautiful writer, first of all, and
Thank you.
you s- you do share story in such a way that, for me, makes it easy to understand. You're very you just have a gift for story as a person, and I am so grateful
Wow.
that you reached out to want to be part of this, because it's just been such a heartwarming experience for me just this last hour. I can't tell you how much I am so grateful for this opportunity to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for bringing me on. It's been a joy, and I can't wait to watch your podcast grow and listen to the other women who are going to come and share this space and be a part of those footprints that we are creating to make everything better for those after us.
Amen, sister. That's the goal. And I get I'm just like so like in awe of the fact that I'm like my tiny little podcast that I do in my tiny little room here in my own house is gone international, and I have somebody I'm talking to somebody from Australia. It is just like in some ways just miraculous to me. Just miraculous. So thank you. Thank you. And I can't wait to follow more about you and hear more about what you're doing. And, if there's anything else that's happening that that you think people would resonate with or share, or you have a new story to talk about, reach out again, because I'd love to have you back. Um, anything that you think is important that you want me to make available for people to find you and hear more about your story, make sure that you send that information to me so I have it on the website for notes. Because, guys, you got to learn more about this amazing woman, Sandy Davies, because she's an inspiration.
Oh, thank you, and I will come back. This is only the beginning.
I hope so, because I guarantee you, just your experience, just this one little experience you show me, but you've had rich experiences, and who knows, there'll be another production that you want to give me more information. So let's elevate those wonderful people who are doing it and leading the way. Let's give them more acknowledgement and visibility, because the more we do it, the more normal it will become. Thanks again, Sandy, for being here. I am so grateful that you reached out.
Absolute pleasure.
There's More to Our Story podcast was created by me, Elisa Gallagher, your host, is produced by Brian Richards. Theme music is by Andy Littlewood. And until next time, please follow the podcast wherever you choose to listen.